It's good to see you this morning. It's good to be with you, not just this morning, but this week. I'm looking very much forward to it. A lot of you probably know it's actually been in the works for years. I was designated to be Vacation Bible School during COVID year 2020, I think was originally the idea, and I've been pushed back a couple of years, which is fine with me because I am overjoyed to be able to be with you, not just this morning, but this week. Phil made mention that there are a lot of folks that we know here, and that is exciting for us, that we're able to kind of reconnect with a lot of you, but there's a lot of you that I don't know, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you this week. And so if I haven't met you yet, certainly come up, introduce yourself. I would love to get to know you as well. Phil made mention my family, for the most part, is here with us this morning. They'll be here tomorrow night as well. We're missing my middle son, Malachi. He's traveling, doing various camps around the country. But we have picked up my oldest son's girlfriend, Taylor. So we are still a family of 5 this morning. They'll be with us again on Monday. Abby and Kim will come back again later in the week. So we're looking forward to being with you. I'll give you a little bit of a heads up so you'll know kind of moving on throughout the week. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we will, for the most part, be following along in a lot of ways exactly what the kids will be talking about. We'll be going in a little bit different directions, but kind of we'll be springboarding off of those same various topics. And so you'll know from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday what the topics that they have been talking about, we in here will be talking about as well. But this morning, we're going to do something certainly a little bit different. We're going to tie together a little bit the time that we have here during the Bible class hour as well as during the worship hour. 2 things, 2 really important things, I think certainly for what our culture is, what our world does, the battles that we face, to kind of, in a very simple way, to keep in our minds straight. And so this morning during this Bible class hour, we're going to talk about 2 words. One I like better than the other, but we're actually going to talk about both of them. One, priority, and the other, purpose. We're going to talk about those during the Bible class hour. During the worship hour, we're going to talk about the importance of focus. All 3 of those words really work well together. So I'm looking forward to our discussion and study. But this morning, here during this hour, priority and purpose. Well, we talk a lot about priorities, about priorities, and I like the idea of priorities. I think it's important that we establish priorities. I'm a big, make sure you have in your mind what your priorities are. Maybe even write down your priorities. I'm a big guy. I like that. I like priorities. I like the idea of priorities. But this morning, we're going to talk about that for sure. But I want us also to maintain the idea that I like the word purpose may be better than priority. We'll talk about why that is here in just a moment. And so I want us to begin to think about this question. How much time do you spend thinking about what you spend your time on? You know, it's one of those really interesting questions. I think it's one of those things that mentally we say we need to be doing that a lot, right? We need to be doing that. How much time do I spend thinking about what I spend my time on? Even though we think we should be doing that, the question is, do we really? I think for the most part, if you're like me, your day begins and you just roll right through the day. It's very similar to the day before. For the most part, I mean, there's not a big difference in my days, really, from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday to Friday. There are some specific things that pop up, but for the most part, those days are pretty much the same. And that's probably the case for you, right? And so you get up and you kind of roll through your day much like every other day before it. And what that tends to do is it puts us in that mindset of I get up and I just kind of roll through the day. It's like yesterday, the next day I get up, I roll through that day, it was like that day. And now we've gone through day after day after day after day, and we've really not given a whole lot of thought to what we're doing or what we're thinking about or the time that we're spending and the things that we're doing. And so this morning I want for just a minute, we're going to use a story from Jesus and his life in Luke chapter 4. You can be opening up your there. We're going to be there here in just a moment in Luke chapter 4. But I want us to be thinking about this idea. This is a kind of, the idea of purpose kind of popped into my mind right at the beginning of this year. At Traders Point, Phil made mention that's where we are working. We've been there about 5 years, just over 5 years. And each and every year, our elders establish a theme for what will be for the year. And so in January of every year, they'll establish a theme for this year. And they'll give me that kind of theme early. And so I'm able to work through some things, and I'll work on that theme throughout the year. But this year, the theme that they kind of gave us was the idea of not just choosing what is good, but choosing what is better. And that concept is really important for the Christian, because it's easy for us to pat ourselves on the back when we do good things, right? Hey, I did a great thing today. Oh, man, I made a good choice. Pat myself on the back. Hey, I made a pretty good choice there. Pat myself on the back. Over here, I made a good choice. Pat myself on the back. And we go about making good choices without realizing sometimes we've missed maybe the better choice. Maybe that choice was a good thing. It was okay. But we've missed the better choice. And as a Christian, we've got to be looking for that. I've got to be looking not just for what is good, but what is the best. Not just what is the good thing to do, what is the best thing to do. That's how wisdom comes into play. And thinking about that theme is this idea of priorities and purpose. And so I want us to keep it pretty simple this morning. And we're going to start with the idea that when it comes to our priorities especially, it comes down to the importance of making eternal things our priority. Put it this way. Everything that matters has an eternal significance. Think about a couple of passages that we have. I've got a couple on the screen here behind me. Mark chapter 8 and verse 36. What shall it profit if a man gains the whole world and loses his soul? Think about the significance of a statement like that. Well, what will it profit if we gain the whole world and lose our own soul? There is a lot in the whole world, right? Elon Musk is he's the man with the most money in the world. He's got more money than anybody else. But guess what? He doesn't have all the money. Doesn't have all of it. He's got the most of anybody, but he doesn't have all of it. And think about the point of this passage. What if you could procure all of the money? Not just the most money, but all of the money. The point that is being made here, what profit is there? If you would gain all of the world, but lose your own soul. What matters are things with eternal significance. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Jesus there in the Sermon on the Mount, talking about all of the physical needs and blessings that we have and need. And that God will provide those things for us if our priority is on things of eternal significance. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2. Excuse me. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. And so you have all of these reminders given to us about maintaining priorities that have eternal significance. Now, let's look to Jesus. In Luke chapter 6, or Luke chapter 4, in Luke chapter 4, there is a situation that happens with Jesus that really gives us some insight, not just into his priority, we'll talk about that, but more importantly, into how he views purpose. Luke chapter 4, let's read it together. Luke chapter 4, beginning in verse 42. Now when it was day, he departed and went into a deserted place. Excuse me, and the crowd sought him and came to him, tried to keep him from leaving them. But he said to them, I must preach the kingdom of God to the other cities also. Man, there is a catch in my throat. Because for this purpose I have been sent. And he was preaching in the synagogues of Galilee. Now, I want you to consider a little bit about what we see here. Phil's going to get me a drink of water. I feel it. I sense it. He got up. I mean, I just saw it. I saw it in his eyeballs. I'm telling you. Excuse me, boy, I'm battling that. All right, I want us to understand that in this passage, you see Jesus an understanding of what his priorities are. So what is he prioritizing? He's got a lot of things going on. He's got a lot of people at his feet. He's got a lot of people pressing on him. A lot of people want his attention. A lot of people want what he has to offer. A lot of that. Well, what is he prioritizing? Well, in a very simple way, what he is prioritizing his relationship with his Father. Now, I want us to think just for a second. Look, I had Phil step out of here. Perfect. Somebody beat you to it. Thank you so much. So much better. So much better. I feel like I should start over. Should I start over? I'm telling you, battling it. All right. Good to see you this morning. I'm excited to be here. Man, oh man. All right. So you have Jesus and his relationship with his Father. That is the key component. It is the key component to everything. Now, what he does here in this passage specifically is he departs away from the people. Now, I want you to understand, this wasn't because he doesn't love people, or that he didn't want to be around people, or he wasn't interested in talking to people, or teaching people, or healing people. It didn't have anything to do with that. Yes, he set aside himself, he separated himself and went to a deserted place. Yes, all of that happened. But it wasn't because of his relationship with the people, or his lack of love, or his lack of desire, or his lack of want to be around them. Everything is driven, specifically by his relationship with his Father. That ultimately is his priority. Think about some things we often say. Maybe we've had a long day, and we get home. I mean, I'm telling you, I feel like, thank you. You're out there sitting there thinking, what is this guy doing up here? Maybe you've had a long day, and you get home, and that's on your mind, and you say, you know what? I've had a long day. I just need to relax. I need some time for myself. Maybe I've got a big day tomorrow. I need a little bit of me time. You see, Jesus, he had long days. He had things he had to deal with, right? He had things going on. But what does he say? I need extra God time. Now, you can hold your finger right there in Luke chapter 4. One page over in my Bible, you see this really again, even in Luke chapter 6. In Luke chapter 6 and verse 12, almost in a very similar kind of way. Luke chapter 6 and verse 12, listen, now it came to pass in those days that he went out to the mountain to pray and continued there all night in prayer. And so you see there, even in Luke chapter 6, you have Jesus, instead of being focused on, getting a good night's rest, he is spending all night in prayer. And so you have to ask yourself the question, well, what's driving that? What's driving his thought process? He's surrounded by all of these people, but yet he separates himself and goes to a deserted place to spend time with the Father. He has a busy day. He goes up onto the mountain to pray all night long. Well, what's driving that? Well, the one thing that's driving that, really the only thing that's driving that, is now his relationship with the Father. That is his number one priority. I'll tell you, it was his only priority. It was the only thing on his mind. What his relationship with the Father is. So I want us to think about, from our perspective, what that looks like. Well, what if I go my entire life, every single day, And that's what my focus is. Every day, my focus is my relationship with the Father. Now, how do relationships form? How are relationships maintained? How are relationships built upon? See, each and every day, we deal with relationships all the time, right? We have lots of different kinds of relationships, lots of different types of relationships. We have relationships with maybe a spouse, much as a lot of you have. Relationships maybe that we have, with our children. Relationships that we have with good friends. Relationships that we have with brethren. Relationships that we have with strangers. We have relationships with coworkers. We have relationships with people in the community. We have all kinds of different relationships. How do relationships maintain? How are relationships built upon? Well, we know the answer to that. Relationships are built upon, relationships are maintained with communication, and Jesus understands that. So you see in Luke chapter 4, he is departing into a deserted place. We see in Luke chapter 6, him going to the mountain to pray even all night. So for us, if we begin to think about it, if Jesus, being God himself, needed to maintain this relationship with the Father, how much more do we need to do that? How much then does it need to be a relationship that I have? So the question becomes, am I making that relationship with God my number one priority? And maybe you ask, well, how can I find that out? Well, I'll tell you, the test is simple. The test is simple. You see, when we're trying to figure out what our number one priority is, what our priorities in life are, the test comes down to time. What am I spending my time on? It's something that you can't get past. It's something that always tells the truth. Always tells the truth. What am I spending time on? If my relationship, say, with my children is my priority, I'm able to see that because I'm spending a lot of time with them. I'm spending time thinking about them. I'm spending time doing things for them. I'm spending time with them. You're probably thinking, is this guy ever going to stop coughing? Right? That's what you're thinking. And I'll tell you, I'm thinking the exact same thing, right? I'm thinking the exact same thing. But it is an easy test that we have. Maybe your work is your priority because that's where your time is spent. You spend all your time thinking about work. You spend all your time at work. You spend all your time doing work. You're spending all of this time. Maybe your priorities are your hobbies, things that you enjoy to do. Well, again, how do you know that? Because that's where all your time is spent. And so for each and every one of us, we can sit here this morning. We could think, well, what am I spending my time on? We can ask ourselves the question, is my relationship with God a priority for me? Well, I can just analyze how much time I spend on it. How much time am I spending in prayer? How much time am I spending in study? How much time am I spending in meditation? How much time am I spending in those areas? We could sit here and analyze that. I don't have to do that for you. Each and every one of us can do that. Everybody can do that. Am I spending more time on my relationship with God than anything else? Or is there something else standing on top of God? Maybe it is family. Maybe it is work. Maybe it is our hobbies or our recreation. Maybe it is all of those things. But when we begin to think about it this way, I want us to understand one other way to analyze this. What if God is our priority is to discover our purpose. To discover our purpose and then to fulfill that. What our purpose is. You see, Jesus understood his purpose. I want you to go back to Luke chapter 4. I want you to look back closely to Luke chapter 4. And I want you to understand that, yes, absolutely, his priority was God and his relationship with him. But also, Jesus understood his purpose. I want you to read 42 through 44 again. I want you to look for it. Now, when it was day, he departed and went into a deserted place. And the crowd saw him and came to him and tried to keep him from leaving. But he said, I must preach the kingdom of God to the other cities also, because for this purpose I've been sent. And he was preaching in the synagogues of Galilee. Now, I want you to understand, specifically when it comes to Jesus and finding what his purpose is. He states here in Luke chapter 4, that his purpose was preaching. That's what his purpose was. Now, from the people's perspective, their perspective is, let's do everything we can to keep this guy here with us. Now, do you blame them for that? I certainly don't. I don't blame them. They've been listening to Jesus. They've been following Jesus. He's been there. He's been helping them. They want him to stay. I don't blame them for that at all. But Jesus responds with an understanding of his purpose. Did you notice in verse 43 what he says to them? I must preach. You see, now we get a picture of what his purpose, not just that, his understanding of his purpose. Because he doesn't say, listen, this is what I want to do, or it's one good thing to do, or it's an okay thing to do, or it's one among several good things to do. You see, he understands his purpose. I must do this. I must preach the gospel. I must do this. Now, I want you to think about from Jesus' perspective. Healing people of disease was a wonderful thing. Feeding people was a wonderful thing. Teaching people was a wonderful thing. Casting out demons, it was a wonderful thing. But what if Jesus did all of those things? What if Jesus here healed all of those people, fed all of those people, casted out all of the demons? Good things, right? Good things. Well, what if he did all of those things, but failed to do the thing that God sent him to do? What if he did all of those good things? He helped thousands of people, but failed in the one thing that God had sent him to do. What does that look like? Well, that looks like failure. In a lot of ways, that's where we struggle. Because sometimes we get ourselves wrapped up in good things. We do. We look at our life and we think, you know what, I'm doing this thing and it's a good thing. Or I'm doing this thing over here, helping these people out, that's a good thing. Or I'm doing this over here, helping these people out, that's a good thing. Or I'm doing this over here, I'm helping these people out, that's a good thing. Look at all these good things that I'm doing. But we're missing God's purpose for us. Illustrate that with a story. Imagine or picture yourself the keeper, and the owner of that lighthouse has entrusted you with keeping that light lit. And he comes to you at the beginning of the month and he gives you a big vat of oil. And he says, here is a vat of oil. And this vat of oil is just enough oil to keep this lighthouse lit for the entirety of this month. Here it is. You say, okay, thank you. I'll take care of it. And a few days go by and there's a knock on the door. And you go down and you open this door and there's a woman there. And she's surrounded by children, and they are shivering. And she says, "Sir, please, can you spare a little bit of oil for our lamp so that we can warm our home? And his children can keep warm." And he sees that, and he is touched by that. He scoops out a little oil, and he gives it to them. A few other days go by. There's another knock on the door. It's a small boy. He's got a big bundle of books in his hands, and he says, "Sir, can you spare just a little bit of oil for my lamp so that at nighttime I can read these books just a little bit?" And so he scoops out a little bit of oil, and he gives it to that boy. A couple days later, they go by. Another knock on the door, and it's a farmer. And he says, "Sir, if you could spare a little oil for the engine for my tractor so that I can get my work done. I'm out. If you could spare just a little." And he scoops out, and he gives the farmer some oil. Now, I want you to understand, all of those things are great things, big helps. And let's say now towards the very end of that month, as that lighthouse worker is trying to keep that light lit, he gets to the bottom of that vat of oil, just enough to last that month, but he's given some away. And he realizes these last few days of the month, I don't have enough oil to light this lighthouse. And in those last few days of the month, there are ships that crash into the rocks. And that lighthouse owner comes back to the lighthouse at the end of the month knowing that these ships have crashed into the rocks. And he says, what happened? I gave you enough oil to light that lamp for the entirety of the month, but the last few nights it wasn't on at all. Then you say, "Well, sir, you missed the fact that a woman came by who had children who were cold, and I gave them some oil. And a young man came by who needed to read, and I gave him some oil. And a farmer came by who needed to turn on his tractor, and I gave him some oil." A scenario like that, is that lighthouse owner going to say, "Oh, those are good things. Those are good things. That makes good sense"? No, it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way. You see, he's going to say, you were given one task. Everything else is second. So the point that I want us to understand is that when we fail at our God-given purposes, we are failures. I want to say that again, and then we're going to talk about some examples of that. When we fail at our God-given purposes, we are failures. Now, let's look at a couple examples of how that comes to be. Consider the apostles. Much like Jesus, this plays out in a very similar kind of way. Look over in Acts chapter 6. I want us to see how this concept starts to play forward a little bit. Acts chapter 6. All right, I want us to read together. We'll start really in verse 1 because it kind of sets the context a little bit, but we'll go down through verse 4. Acts chapter 6, listen to the phraseology that's used per what we've talked about over the last couple of minutes. Acts chapter 6, beginning of verse 1. Now in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplying, there arose a complaint against the Hebrews by the Hellenists because their widows were neglected in the daily distribution. And then the 12, that's the apostles, summoned the multitude of the disciples and said, "It is not desirable that we should leave the word of God and serve tables. Therefore, brethren, seek out from among you 7 men of good reputation, full of the Holy Spirit and wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business." Verse 4, but we will give ourselves continually to prayer and to the ministry of the word. Now, why this passage helps is it's exactly what we had just talked about. You see, the apostles, what their purpose was, they state directly in Acts chapter 6 and verse 4, giving themselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. Now, these other things, these other physical things, the physical needs of these widows were good things, were things that needed to be taken care of. But if they were getting in the way of what the apostles' God-given purpose was, those things had to be moved on to someone else. You see, it was them understanding their purpose. So how does that play out in our life? I want you to look at 3 quick passages. We're just going to read all 3 of them. We're going to tie them all together. All right, the first one, Galatians chapter 2. Galatians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul, listen again with the mindset of purpose in your head. He says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Now keep that in your mind. Flip over to the book of Philippians. Again, the Apostle Paul, Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1, beginning of verse 19. For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope, that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. Now, what is it about these 2 passages for a second? Did you get a sense of the fact that Paul understands what his purpose is? He's got a lot of things going on. He's got a lot of people pulling at him. He's got a lot of stuff happening. He's got a lot of things moving. He's got lots of stuff, but he understands in a very simple way what his purpose is. I love this passage here in Philippians chapter 1. I love the simplicity of this. He says, listen, there was a lot happening. But I do know this, for Christ, he will be magnified. He says it really in a more plain kind of way in verse 21. For to me, to live is Christ. To die is gain. You know, that's a phrase we use a lot. We may not use it in this exact way, but it is a phrase we use a lot, right? My life is all about something, right? We love to fish. We'll say, you know what, my life is fishing. That's what it is. Or my life is golf, or my life is my family, or my life is my work. We use that kind of phraseology a lot. Well, Paul uses it here in Philippians chapter 1. For to me to live is Christ. My life is Christ. All right, now look over to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 is a great, great purpose passage. 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, beginning of verse 9. 9 and 10 of this. He says, but you were a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who were once not a people, but now the people of God, who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. For me this year, this passage has been my key passage. I have spent more time here thinking about this passage this year than any other passage in the New Testament. And it has everything with understanding the simplistic nature of my purpose. Now, listen, I've got a lot going on. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm an evangelist. I'm a community member. I've got a lot of friends. I've got a lot of people that need me for various things. And probably you are a lot like me. I've got a lot happening. And there seems to be a lot of moving pieces in my life. We'll talk a lot more about that during the worship hour and what's coming up next. And so this passage has helped me more this year than any other passage for the simple reason it has kept me focused on my purpose. As a Christian, as a follower of Christ, I have one purpose. Because of what God has done for me. Because of the incredible blessings that I enjoy because of God. Peter lets us to understand that all of these things are set in place so that I will proclaim the praises of God. Now that happens in lots of different ways, right? Certainly verbally, that certainly takes place. Even in the way that I live. In the way that I live, I am proclaiming God, specifically who He is, but more importantly, what He has done for me. You see, that's what verse 10 is all about. Without God, I am an absolute nothing. But with God and because of God, I am special. And I am valued. Without God, no mercy. With God, mercy in abundance. When we begin to think about things like that, and it helps us to see the simplistic nature of purpose and the importance of understanding. We can go back to that passage in Luke. You see, Jesus understanding what His purpose was helps Him, enables Him to make decisions, even hard decisions. The people were clamoring for Him to stay with them. He loved people. He loved helping people. And they were begging of Him to stay. But because He understood His purpose, it enabled Him to make that decision. I can't stay here with you. My purpose is to preach the gospel everywhere. And an understanding of our purpose helps. So we come up and we face an incredible difficulty. And it's one of those times it's difficult for us to get through. Maybe it's one of those moments you're like, I just can't barely maintain my sanity in the midst of this obstacle or midst of this trouble. What helps us get through those kinds of things? An understanding of what my purpose is. An understanding of my purpose helps me to get through those things. We can even, as we close, take that big picture item and move it down even into specifics. I'll give you one example of that as we close this morning. There are lots of other ways that we can use the same idea. But think about parenting. As parents, we have one purpose. That's it, one. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. That is my purpose as a parent. To bring my children up in the training and admonition of the Lord. That is my purpose. Now, by the world's standards, I may succeed as a parent in lots of other ways, right? Maybe I raise my children and they are super, super nice. I mean, super kind. And everybody that I ever come in contact with, that's what they want to talk about. Listen, your children, you've done an incredible job with your children. They are so nice, and they are so kind, and they are so loving. That would be a good thing. Or maybe I raise my children and I push them so hard in their studies, they are incredibly intelligent. And other people notice. And they tell us that all the time, right? They come up to us and say, you have done an incredible job as a parent. He or she, they are the smartest people I know. Or maybe I had driven my children to being incredible athletes. So much so that everybody else notices. And the world pats me on the back constantly at the ball field. And saying, oh, our team would be lost without your son on it. He is so incredible. You have done an incredible job with that child. Or maybe they grow up and they become super successful in business. They have an incredible amount of money. And maybe they're charitable even with their money. And the people of the world take notice of that. And they pat Kim and I on the back. And they say, what an incredible job you've done with your children. They are so successful. You see, that happens in the world all the time. And as parents, we could get pulled into something like that. But let's not lose sight of what our purpose is. And we'll go full circle as we close. If we fail at our God-giving purpose, we are failures. And as a parent, if you drive your child to be super successful or super kind or super rich or super athletic, but you fail to bring them up in the training and the admonition of the Lord as a parent, from God's perspective, you are a failure. And it has to be that edge that we look at. As Christians, we have the purpose to proclaim Christ. If we are not fulfilling that purpose, maybe we're doing lots of other great things. But for God, we are a failure. It is priorities and it is purpose. Powerful, powerful tools. The key component is, can we focus on those things? And in the worship hour, hopefully my cough has subsided, and we'll talk more about that then. Thank you so much.